the American society is honored to bestow on you the gold insignia. You come up, please, sir. Ted Briggs. That's his part. Would you like to wear this? I would love to be honored to put it on you.
Internal, legal, and administrative.
Let me begin with a word of thanks for this invitation to address the Council. This is a great opportunity to exchange impressions about Colombia's future. It is a real pleasure to be in the company of those who see eye to eye with us on where the world economy is heading, on what it takes to promote sustainable growth, and that the right tools for social and economic development are state-of-the-art technology and good old-fashioned competition. At the heart of all this is the business community. Many of the businesses represented here today have operations in Colombia. As business leaders, you have believed in our economy, in our markets, in our fundamental political stability, and above all, in the quality and capacity of our workforce. I believe in all of this as well, just as I believe that Colombia has enormous potential to become a much greater generation of industry, business, and quality of life for all Latin Americans. And you, more than anybody else, understand that the skills that have distinguished us internationally have not come easily, which is also why I sympathize with the great interest you have shown in the paths we're taking and how my government sees the future in the short and the long term from a variety of national perspectives. I will keep this brief but comprehensive, and then we'll have time for some questions. One major source of concern comes from the economic measures adopted by my government. As you know, when we arrived, we found an economy in trouble, reflected, among other symptoms, in a fiscal deficit of nearly 5% of the gross domestic product. With the goal of reducing this deficit, we have adopted a series of measures that include large cutbacks in the bureaucracy, in the government's investment budget, plus tax reforms that look to make tax collection more efficient. In addition, a few weeks ago, we sent several bills to Congress which we expect will put the Senate Financial House in order. It is not a secret that these last few years have been some of the most difficult in the history of the United States-Colombian relation. At the same time, the United States is and will remain Colombia's most important trading partner, not to mention our mainly ally in the international war on drugs, the most vexing problem we face in our foreign relations. My government, which got underway on August 7th, has made it the top priority to rebuild Colombia's international relations so the country can recuperate the leading position it warrants on the world stage. To do this, we must, above all, normalize relations with our primary commercial partner, something we will go a long way in doing come my state visit to the White House at the end of October. Yet, it will be presumptuous to say this cannot be done in a matter of days. The rebuilding of reciprocal trust requires real efforts from both sides. Since my election on June 21st, we have taken several fundamental steps in this direction, including meeting with President Clinton a few days before my inauguration. At this meeting, we both agreed that our relationship has been put back on track again, and the President also made it clear that we can count on the United States' support to help resolve our domestic problems. The war on drugs because of its sheer magnitude and importance, will remain crucial to our relationship, but it must not dominate the agenda. We must increase exchange in areas like the trade and investment, as well as culture and education. That is why we are already discussing such initiatives with Washington. The main responsibility for diversifying our agenda will lie with our Ambassador Luis Alberto Moreno, who is already well known to many of you here today. Ambassador Moreno and his team will play a central role in further strengthening the U.S.-Colombian relations, which, as I've said, have entered a new era of cooperation. The strategy we have developed for increasing Colombian export focuses to a large degree on the United States. Our two governments must labor under the conviction that in order to expand and vitalize commercial outlets, we must also work in an environment of mutual advantage. We must never lose sight of this. And although I don't want to bore you with a lot of figures, I feel it is necessary to have an idea of how, in light of our recent problems, this advantage has been weakened, thought not entirely lost. Colombian exports increased from approximately 3.6 billion in 1995 to roughly 4.2 billion in 1996. This is a growth of some $600 million or 17%. Yet the figures for 1997 show an overall increase of only 150 million or 3.5%. On the other side of the equation, U.S. imports to Colombia grew from $5.4 billion in 1995 to $5.6 billion in 1996, or by roughly 3.3%. In 1997, however, these numbers jumped almost to $6.4 billion, an increase of nearly $800 million, or 14% from the previous year. In the hopes of rectifying this trade imbalance, our Minister of Foreign Trade has initiated, under my instructions, a series of measures to double Colombian exports overall by the end of my administration. We have set clear tasks before ourselves, some which we have been under discussion with the United States officials for some time now, but it lacked the necessary impulse. Chief among them was the indispensable protection of foreign investment in our country. Regulations in Colombia regarding foreign trade are much like those found throughout most of the world, with the exception that is of Article 58 in our Constitution, which deals with expropriation. I will return to this in a minute. First, let me remind you that Colombia is a member of the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency and the International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes. One of the first things on our agenda is to sign a bilateral investment treaty, or BIT, between our two countries. These should remove the existing barriers and attract new U.S. investment in Colombia. The signing of such treaty will allow us to recover much of the dynamic lost these last few years. We are heartened by the fact that during the 7th meeting of the Bilateral Commission on Investment and Trade, the U.S. presented a new outline for a BIT, which is under review by my administration. Since August, there have been a series of meetings between leaders of the Colombian Central Bank and the U.S. Treasury Department, and the mood has been very, very constructive. However, the chief obstacle in the negotiation and eventual ratification of a bilateral trade agreement remains expropriation without indemnity, as stated in Article 58 of the Colombian Constitution. My administration understands that this article is not in accord with conditions investors look for a foreign market, and that, on the contrary, it is what worries them more than almost anything else. But fear not. We are determined to put great effort in promoting the needed constitutional reform before the Colombian Congress, with the hope that it will be approved very soon. Last week, the Minister of Foreign Affairs presented the reform of the Constitution of Article 68 and right now is in the hand of the Congress. And we're going to put all our efforts to promote the reform of the Constitution regarding this article. We hope that this mechanism, along with the eventual implementation of a system of fiscal credit as used in Puerto Rico and other Caribbean nations in the past, will prove to be a great benefit for all U.S. investors in Colombia, as well as a means of attracting new ones. We plan on raising the issue with the U.S. government. We also understand that an adequate system for protection of intellectual property constitutes a fundamental basis for the broadening of our economy relations. We know that this is a source of great concern for the investor. Colombia has made real progress on this score in order to pass legislation to meet recognized international standards. Our commitment now is to enforce the trade-related intellectual property rights, the TRIP, by the year 2000, as agreed to by the World Trade Organization. Here, also with the Andean community, we plan to develop a way to modify the norms and bind them before the year 2000. Such actions demonstrate our dedication to help broaden and deepen our commercial ties. In this context, one should also note our proposal to perfect the preference system of the Andean Trade Preference Act, the ATPA, with the object to expand its coverage and prolong its term. This will allow us to include competitive Colombian products in the system destined for the U.S. market. We consider the best way to do this will be to extend the ATPA until the free trade zone of the America is in force. I have signaled that to a start of our commitment to the process of integration and of ways to improve our competitiveness and accelerate our entrance into the global economy. The free trade zone of the Americas represents the best possibility for the Western Hemisphere nations to consolidate their growth expectations and gain a greater stake in the global economy. I wish to make it very clear to my government that my government will lead a frontal assault against the world drug problem, both through conventional means like eradication and the destruction of laboratories, but also by focusing on other links in the chain, like money laundering and one of its most important mechanisms, contraband. At the same time, we will support efforts for alternative development programs in the areas most plagued by violence. We are deeply committed to a strict control of contraband, which will include much harsher penalties for offenders. Some of these initiatives are included in the bills presented to the Colombian Congress a few weeks ago. Contraband has been one of the principal vehicles used by the narco-traffickers to launder money. This makes contraband in Colombia much more than just an evasion of taxes and customs duties. It makes the smugglers accomplices of drug traffickers. That is why we will exercise the necessary internal legal and administrative controls and at the same time seek the required bilateral cooperation, especially with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and Customs in Florida. However, to be able to fight these crimes successfully, we will need the support of other countries, like Aruba and Panama, that have become the springboard of contraband to Colombia. But we would also need the support of the business people whose products are being used to launder money, so we can identify the smugglers and money launderers and bring them to justice. Frequently, it is legitimate business like yours that are the most adversely affected by the contraband trade in Colombia, as it lessens the value of your goods and promotes unfair competitions against legally imported products. For this reason, the companies that produce the goods most often use a contraband can no longer continue denying their collaboration to the authorities without being pointed out as accomplices. We will dedicate our best efforts in our fight against contraband as a central part of the war on drugs. My administration is very aware that if we are to achieve what I have outlined here today, then it will be absolutely crucial for the investor and for all Colombians to consolidate an atmosphere of peace and security. Peace, something which all Colombians demand, remains at the heart of our agenda. We have already initiated contacts with the top guerrilla leaderships, which in turn has opened up the chance for meaningful dialogue in the next several weeks. We truly hope that by the end of this government, we will have reached a sound and viable peace agreement. In order to finish this process successfully, we must develop certain social and economic initiatives that will need the cooperation of some friendly nations and multilateral agencies, as well as the Colombian private sector. No one in Colombia can turn away from this process, which is meant for the good for all. For everyone, it will have been better to have contributed to peace process rather than continue living with violence. Support for the fight against corruption will also be needed. It is not a secret that there are two persons needed in the act of corruption, the corrupter and the corrupted. The role of the private sector in Colombia will also be decisive in this fight, a fight that requires a culture opposed to corruption. Rest assured that my administration will fully enforce such anti-corruption laws. As you can see, we have a lot of work ahead of us, but the benefits to be gained, both for the investors and for Colombia as a whole, are more than obvious if we keep on the right path and if your companies do not lose faith in Colombia. In this time of worldwide economic crisis, when the great economies of Asia have fallen and insecurity is everywhere, I am still confident that we are heading in the right direction. Whatever decision we make must not be to soften the immediate pain or avoid doing the unpopular thing, but to secure at all costs a better, stronger future, one which will make our child proud. Thank you very much.
I'm Susan Purcell, the Vice President of the Council. The President has very kindly agreed to answer some of your questions, and we will begin now. The first question is from Federico County, Senior Economist, Goldman Sachs and Company.
Good morning, Mr. President. Your administration has shown its resolve to tackle the difficult economic problems facing the Colombian economy, and it has sent, as you said, a broad bill to Congress, including a number of measures to tackle the structural problems in the fiscal accounts. The question I have is, what strategy is your government following to secure that the bill is going to be passed by Congress, and what contingency measures does your administration have in case the bill is not approved? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. First of all, what we are trying to assure first, what we are trying to sell to the country is that the problem that we are having right now, even that now we have an international also effects on our economy. We're dealing with all the members of the Congress, trying to show them that if we want to be right back in the right path, we need the support of the Congress. That even that we have a majority in Congress at this moment, that will allow us to take all this bill out of the Congress. We are creating the conscience between all of them that this is a work that should be done by the government, by the Congress, and also by the effort of the people. If you see, I think the easy thing to do for my government was staying where we were, don't take all these political, as you know, take these political measures that will affect the government, not the Congress. But since the starting of my government, I said, look, we should do whatever we should do, even those are unpopular measures to put the economy on the right path. This is the sacrifice of the government. We need the sacrifice of the Congress. We need the sacrifice of the people. And we clearly know that we will have the support of the Congress. As I said, we have the majority, but I think that we will try to get this consensus. We know that we need this reform on our tax system. We need to do a bigger effort in the government to reduce the expenditures of the government, but at the same time, the people are willing to do something to bring back the economy on the right path. So I think that they have the conscience right now that they are giving the support to the government to bring all these measures out.
The next question is from Mario Baeza, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of TCW Latin America. And where is Mario?
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good morning.
For those of us who look to invest in Colombia and find it an attractive country, there is the issue of violence on the streets. And in particular, if you do a search sort of what's been happening in Colombia, you see nothing but hotel bombings downtown. Obviously, all the violence with the guerrillas, and then obviously this new relationship that seems to be developing between narco-traffickers and the guerrillas, and how. And really, my question is how and what measures are you going to take to help foreign investors actually come to Colombia and actually try to get some business done? Thank you.
I think that, as you said, not only foreign investments, but Colombians, our first goal is to achieve peace. As you remember, 10 million Colombians voted on last October elections for mayors and governors in what we call the mandate for peace. And I understood that mandate as a mandate to the next government to look forward in all the ways to achieve peace in Colombia. As you said, I think not only for you, the foreign investors, but for us, that's our first goal. In my campaign, I promised that if I was elected president of the country, the first thing I will do was going to the jungle and meet the leaders of the guerrilla. The 9th of July, I did that. I went to the middle of the jungle, I met the guerrilla leaders, spoke with them, and I think there are 2 or 3 points that I want to point out of that meeting. First of all, it was the first time that the guerrilla leaders met with some authority in the last 4 years. Second, is the first time the guerrilla leaders met with a Colombian authority without asking in advance demilitarization or asking conditions for the meeting with a Colombian authority. Third, as you know, they've pointed out 10 points. And I think 2 of them in which I put more efforts were the political reform that they are planning, that it's something that can and should be done through the Congress. But secondly, in the last point of the 10 points pointed by the guerrilla movement is a point that really called my attention. And it was the eradication of illicit crops, cocaine and poppy fields in these areas where they have influence. So I put a lot of pressure on this point on how can we develop a strategy to eradicate illicit crops in these areas. So that's when I start talking about what a special peace plan program, type of Marshall Plan, to be developed hand by hand, maybe with them or by other institutions, in promoting special programs for these areas. We're starting for investing in infrastructure, the alternative development for the peasants that are involved in the illicit crops, investing in social programs, education, housing, water, sewage. So for the first time, we propose a special program. Now we have we've been working with the IDP in a special fund. They gave us nearly $100 million for starting to develop this program. Yesterday with the United Nations, we have a fund of $1 billion to be invested in the next 10 years, $100 million a year, also to be managed by this special fund. In our reform, that in the laws, the bills that we present to the Congress, we create a obligatory bonus for the 5,000 largest taxpayers in Colombia. I think that we could raise nearly between $600 to $800 million a year to be also managed through this fund. So for the first time, I've said if we achieve peace, I think that's the first battle to win over the drug lords. So for the first time, I think there's a new different approach for this violence that we have in our country, and basically in these areas in which generate that the largest, I think, violence in Colombia. So I think that that's what we're working. We will have the first meeting with the guerrillas in the next 50 days with the FARC. We have basically FARC-ELN, the FARC that it's almost 80-85% of the guerrilla, 75 to 85% of the guerrilla in Colombia. We will try to meet with them in the next 50 days. From that point, we will sit in the table of negotiations. We will fix the agenda. We will appoint our speakers from the guerrilla leaders and from the government and start all this peace process with them, hand by hand, in looking forward for the eradication of illicit crops. And on the other side, now the government established a direct contact with the ELN, so we are working also with this social society or the civil society, hand by hand with the ELN and now with the government, to create also the environment to achieve peace with the ELN. So I think that for the first time we have a different environment in the country. We know that we could achieve peace. It's not going to be easy. I've said that this is going to take a long time, that we have to be first very discreet in this process, secondly very serious and very responsible.
President. The next question is from James Upton, Latin American Equity Strategist, CFB.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Considering the pressure on the exchange rate policies of Brazil and Venezuela at this time, if we were to see some movement toward devaluation in either of those countries, in what way do you feel that Colombia would need to respond, particularly considering the ambitious export goals you outlined this morning?
I think that we have already responded. That's why we took some of the measures we took some days ago. I think that definitely Colombia should be in advance, and that's why with the economic team, we thought that those were the measures that we needed to try to avoid crisis, not only in Brazil, as maybe it could happen, but in our borders, basically with Venezuela and Ecuador. So that's why I think that that's the measures we took were in the right path, and we think that with them we could be in the in this crisis. If it really comes to Brazil, I think that Colombia will defend with the measures taken, and I think those are in the right path. That's what we heard. You already heard last week Minister Juan Camilo Restrepo here. Also, the IMF and the World Bank support the Colombian measures, and I think we are in the right path. I don't know, maybe the Director de Planeación, if there's something new or something more to explain to our friends, but I think that those are we are in the right way, and we hope that what we did in the last weeks, we could support what could happen in South America.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next question is from Rosemary Werrett, President, Latin American Information Services.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Hello. My question has to do with oil. And the question is, do you have any plans for restructuring the industry during your tenure? Over the last several years, it's been characterized by an unattractive tax regime, a lot of security problems. Investment has left Colombia instead of coming in. So are there any plans to think anew what the policy should be for this major industry?
Okay, you allow, I think that there's two parts in the question. One is a political one, and maybe a technical one. Even we have here the Minister of Mines, so Energy, and he could also tell you in depth what we are planning. But definitely, first of all, what we need to create is security in our country. First of all, and really that's what's happening in the areas where the oil is. I think that's why even the ELN, that has been the guerrilla movement with more presence in those areas. Maybe this is a point that they're going to take to what they call the National Convention that is going to be held in a few weeks in Colombia. But definitely what we think in Colombia is that we need to give our investors security. Second, I think that we have to be more competitive, and that's why maybe we are looking forward how can we manage our legislation. We need to invite the foreign investment in exploration. We have oil until year 2005, 2006, and that's why I think that we need to really put a lot of effort in exploration, in investment in exploration. And we know that security is very, very important issue, and that's why I think also the oil industry is looking forward to how can we achieve all these peace process. So we are with the minister reviewing some of the legislation to see how, as I said, we could be more competitive regarding even some of our neighbors, Bolivia, or even what is happening in Venezuela. And giving all the support for the industry, and we hope to have more investment in the next year, so we could be auto-sufficient after year 2006. I don't know, Luis Carlos, if you could. You have the microphone?
Would you like to come up here?
First, in terms of taxes, we're not planning to do any specific tax reform related to oil. I think it is necessary to show a bit of flexibility in terms of the current association contracts, especially for incremental production and for what is called an on-top contract that is going to be used especially to modify certain association contracts related to offshore exploration. I think we have a difficult task here. We need to find additional reserves of 2.5 billion in the next 5 years. So I think we already showed flexibility by changing the contracts. We're using this new R factor that is widely known. And what we would be willing to do, and we would be willing to discuss, is what is the required flexibility for non-active fields to be attractive for potential investors. But again, the changes should be related to contracts, not related to tax reforms. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Graham Stock, a research analyst, Chase Manhattan Bank.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Morning.
We've heard a lot this morning about Colombia's domestic problems, but I have a specific question about the poor global environment that Colombia faces. On Colombia's immediate doorstep, Brazil and Venezuela may be heading for recession, and elsewhere in emerging markets, we see a potential severe shortage of private sector capital as investors shy away from emerging markets in the wake of problems in Russia and Asia. What steps can the government take, and what plans will the government implement to adapt if Colombia is not able to tap international capital markets in 1999?
Yeah, I think that our minister was very clear in the visit last week that we know that maybe we could have that problem, that we are solving that problem. That's why we need the support of the multilateral system. Clearly, we're searching for new resources. We know that we need resources for 1999 and the year 2000, basically, in the order of $3,000 billion for the next 2 years. We have been an export of capital to the multilateral system for the last years, and that's why we're asking them also to give us the support for Colombia, the World Bank, IMF. So that's the doors that we're going to knock to find out a solution for the problem that we're going to have in the next 2 years. And we expect also all these crises to go over. We said even in the group of Rio that Latin America has done the job, has done the work, the assignment in the last year, and it's not fair for us that even that all these countries did all their assignment that we will suffer. So that's why we are going to ask also the multilateral system to give us the support to get out of the crisis if it comes to the country.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Before I thank the President, may I ask you all to please stay in your seats until the President and his party leave the room. Mr. President, it has been...
Really, thank you.
Well,
smooth background for the Council, for the decoration, and thank you all for your presence this morning and this breakfast. Thank you very much.